Hey everybody, so this is the honors discussion session lecture that you were supposed to get if everything didn't break down during our actual class. So again, I apologize for those technical failures. I don't know what happened there. It was working before the class and it's working after the class. It just for whatever reason wasn't working during the class. Right, so with that in mind, I'll go through the slides that I had prepared for you. And again, these slides were kind of a collaboration project of Anthony Davies, who's a professor at Duquesne University, and then several economists and political scientists around the country who have kind of used these to teach high school workshops, right? So again, we've all kind of instituted our own personal spin on these particular slides, but I want to make sure to give credit to them as well. So again, we're going to be talking a little bit about public choice economics, which is applying what we know about human behavior in the private sector to the public sector. Or in other words, just saying that people in government, just like people in business, respond to incentives. And so what kind of incentives does the public sector face? And what does that mean for the political process? And so in order to motivate this particular presentation, there's a quote from E.M. Forster that says, 2 cheers for democracy. 1, because it admits variety, and 2, because it permits criticism. 2 cheers are quite enough. There is no occasion to give 3. And the reason why that's a motivating quote here is because I often dub this lecture the dark side of democracy, as we're going to talk about how the democratic process might fail us in achieving the outcomes we hope to achieve. So with that in mind, let's continue forward here. So here's how we think central planning works, right? So we have a voter, we have a politician, and then we have a bureaucrat, and then we have their goals and their respective actions. So let's say that we have a problem being that some workers don't earn a living wage. So the goal of the voter might be to help all people earn a living wage, and so the action would be to vote for politicians who support a living wage policy, right? And the politician their job is to do what is in the best interest of society. So that's what their goal should be in the ideal process on how this, or ideal way in which this political process is supposed to work. And so they would design and vote for living wage laws if that's what their constituency voted for them to do. And then the bureaucrat their job is to serve the public, right? So these are those government workers who carry out the political laws or politicians' orders. And so they're going to execute these living wage laws in such a way to provide good for the poor. And as long as everything works this way, then everything is all rainbows and unicorns. And again, this is the ideal way in which the political process is supposed to work. And this is probably the way that you've been taught that it works if you've ever taken a political science course or maybe a social studies class in high school, right? But unfortunately, it doesn't always work this way because people are rationally self-interested. So again, we have the same problem. Some workers don't earn a living wage. So what is the voter's goal? Well, the voter's goal is what everybody's goal is, and that is to maximize their own happiness. And what this means is that they'll become informed and vote only if they expect the benefit of that of voting to exceed the cost of voting. So if they perceive that their vote actually matters and the benefits of them actually voting for a policy will exceed the cost of them becoming informed and going down to the voting booth and actually voting, right? Only then will they cast an informed vote. As we talked about in chapter 1 with the rational ignorance effect, that doesn't happen very often. And then politicians, the goal is to maximize their own happiness, right? Again, they're people just like anybody else. And how does the politician maximize their own happiness? Well, they maximize their own happiness by attracting over 50% of the voters or getting elected. Again, a politician who doesn't get elected isn't a politician anymore. They're just some person, right? And then the bureaucrat's job is to maximize their own happiness. And the way that they might do that is to craft a job that satisfies the bureaucrat's needs. And unfortunately, our system falls apart, right? We have destroyed our rainbows and unicorns, right, through, again, the people responding to these self-interested incentives. So with that in mind, again, we're not going to really change people's motivations. That's not something that happens. So let's talk a little bit again about how this works through our political system, right? So we might argue that our democracy guards against selfish behavior as long as we vote in the right people. So if we vote in better people, then we can overcome these kinds of problems. Well, let's talk a little bit about how this might work, right? So again, we have different groups of people here. We have Group A, and we're going to say that Group A is kind of the well-to-do or wealthy people. And then Group B over here are kind of those people who are more impoverished. And so what if we try to come up with a policy where we take $10 from everybody in Group A, right, and give it to those people in Group B, right? Now, that might be a good or bad policy, but here's a little wrinkle to it. What if we take $10 from everybody in Group A, and then we just burn half of it, and we give what's left to people in group B. Right. Well, if we do that, then that's going to cost everybody in group A $10, but people in group B are going to get a lot of money because it's divided up over a very small group of people. So in looking at this policy, right, I don't think anybody agrees that it's good to burn half this money, but if this was the policy, of course people in group A would be against it, right? People in group B might be for it because even though it is inefficient and that we're burning half the money, they're still going to get a lot of money per person as a result of this policy. Right, so who's going to want to vote in this system? Well, again, ideally people from both Group A and Group B are going to want to vote. And because the people in Group A outnumber the people in Group B, and the people in Group A are sure this is a dumb policy, then this policy will be voted down, and that's probably a good thing for society, given that this was a dumb policy. Right, but now we're going to take into account this idea of information and voting costs. And again, this is stuff that is kind of assumed away in most political science classes, but something that economists take very seriously. Right? It takes time and effort to be aware that this policy even exists. Right? We got to find this information. That could involve spending at least an hour looking up these policies and their potential effects. Right? We might have to, again, read some information that is presented to us, digest it, think about what we've read, and actually go out and cast an informed vote. Right? All of that takes time, effort, and money, right, that you could be using for something else. Right? So with that in mind, let's say that the information and voting cost is $20. And again, we are just taking $10 from everybody in Group A. Again, we're burning half of it, and we're giving it to the people in Group B. Right? So Group B might see as much as $30 per person, but it's only costing people in Group A $10 per person. Well, if information and voting cost is $20, then it is not worth it for people in Group A to vote against this policy. Again, it's going to cost them $20 to find out about the policy and actually go vote, where it only costs them $10 if this policy is passed. Now, people in Group B are going to get at least $30 from this policy, so again, it is worth it for them to vote for it. So again, people in Group B will vote for it. People in Group A won't vote against it. Right. So again, Group B will be doing the voting, Group A won't, and this is a policy that will be passed. As we just talked about, because we're burning half this money, this probably isn't an efficient policy, and we wouldn't say that society is necessarily better off because it was passed, right? And unfortunately, stuff like this exists all the time in the real world, right? So this is what we call the special interest effect, and that's where you have concentrated benefits and dispersed costs. So the benefit is split among a few voters, while the cost is split among many voters. So the example we gave in class is that a number of employees in California number at about $17,500,000 right now. So we as a class could go to the government and propose that we tax each one of these employees just $1 per year, right? So $1 per year times the 17,500,000 employees comes out to $17,500,000. And then we encourage that government to give that money to us as a honors economics class so we can use it to conduct economic research that is going to benefit the state of California, right? Now, there's only 25 people in this class, so if we divide that $17,500,000 by 25 people, that's going to come out to $700,000 per person. So again, this is what we mean by those concentrated benefits, in that each one of us, the 25 people in this class, would receive $700,000 if this policy were passed. But it only costs everybody else in the state of California just $1 per year. So people in the state of California are not going to be as eager to vote against this as the people in this class are going to be eager to vote for it. Right? We might take a week off of school or work to lobby the government in favor of this policy, knowing that we're going to get $700,000 a year if it's passed. People are going to take a week off of school or work to vote against something that's only going to cost them $1 per year. Right? So again, you have 25 people in the politician's ear telling them to make this happen. Right? You're going to have nobody in the politician's ear telling them to not make it happen. Most people won't even know about this policy, and so politicians are going to make it happen. Right? And so again, because the costs are so dispersed among everybody here in California as just $1 per year, right, they're going to be what we call rationally ignorant, right, or they're going to have this incentive to remain ignorant of and disengaged from the voting process, right? They might not vote against it because they might not even know it's happening, right? And there's all kinds of policies like this that exist throughout the world. For example, the Sugar Growers of America have imposed a tariff or tax against foreign sugar that makes people in the United States pay more for world sugar, more for sugar prices, than people elsewhere around the world, right? This only costs households about $20 per year in inflated sugar prices, right? But it nets about $30,000 for each of the sugar growers. So the sugar growers are going to lobby for this, right? These households where it's only costing us $20 per year are really going to lobby against it. So this is something that tends to get passed, right? So again, this is how voter behavior works in a democracy, right? Now, you might say, but wait a second, right? We're a republic, not a democracy. We put people in charge to find out this stuff for us so that we don't have to become that informed about our politics, right? So maybe we can still have our unicorns and rainbows here if, again, we can vote in the right people who are going to represent our interests and are paid to become informed about all these policies, right? So again, people elect representatives, and it's representatives' jobs to become informed and engaged. So that's the idea here. Right, so again, if we have a lot of people from Group A and a minority from Group B, then maybe Group A will have 2 representatives, whereas Group B will just have 1, and then we can use those representatives to become informed about all these policies and make sure that the right stuff gets passed. Right, so again, that's a nice idea. When you hear stuff about like the Electoral College, and you hear the idea that we have like these congressmen and senators who are supposed to represent us, right? That's kind of where this idea comes from, right? Now, with that in mind, how do we assign representatives to voters? Well, we have to create voting districts, right? Now, creating voting districts is both a kind of an art and a science, right? With that in mind, let's talk a little bit about how this can be done. So let's say that these are all the households, and we need to divide these households evenly into 5 districts, right? So again, as you can see, we have a majority of green households, we have a minority of red ones, right? So you might imagine that there's going to be more green representatives than red representatives, but it also depends on just how you divide up this district, right? So what could be a fair representation? Well, we have 60% of the households green, 40% of the households red. So if we had 5 representatives from this particular area, then we should have 3 green ones and 2 red ones in order to match people's preferences. And if we divided these up into rows, then you would have that, right? So in other words, if these houses were divided up into 5 voting districts each by a row, then you'd have 3 green representatives, you'd have 2 red ones, and we'd reach the efficient representation here of our voters, right? So again, 3 districts, 2 districts, that would be fair. But they don't have to be divided up into rows. They can be divided up into any number of ways. For example, rather than divide them up in the rows, we can divide them up in the columns, right, where every 2 columns represents a district, right? If that is the case, then you'll notice that they're all going to be green, which means that the preferences of those red households are going to be completely eliminated. So again, our representatives here don't necessarily match the preferences of our voting constituency if we divide up this way, right? We have a unanimous green representatives here, right? So 5 green representatives and 0 red ones, right? So we could divide it up that way, right? So where the majority completely eliminates the minority and their preferences, right? Now they could also be divided up into any number of funky ways. So you could divide it up like this, right, where that district would give you a red voter or a red representative, and this district would also give you a red representative, right? That district would give you a green one, this one would also give you a green one, and this one that's left gives you a red one. So now even though red represents the minority of households, it's actually going to represent a majority of Congress or Senate here in terms of having 3 red representatives to 2 green ones. Right, so again, this would result in 3 red districts and 2 green ones, even though that doesn't necessarily represent the preferences of our population. So this process here of dividing up voting districts is called gerrymandering, and it happens a lot in order to make sure that people get their political goals achieved. Right. So again, there's different ways that you can divide this up. You can divide it up in a way that accurately represents the population. You can divide it up in a way that completely eliminates the minority preferences. Or you could even divide it up in such a way to where the minority preferences end up yielding the majority of representatives, right? So again, multiple ways that you can do it, right? By the way, here's a look at the state of California. If you notice, particularly in some areas like Southern California, right, you have things divided up in what looks like pretty particular ways, right? In other words, it looks like they went to a lot of effort to carve out these districts to look a certain way, right? Maybe to have certain representatives in charge, or have certain preferences represented by, again, the people in charge, right? So again, right, this happens a lot where these districts are broken up according to what political preferences the people in power might want to see. All right. So as far as voter behavior is concerned in democracy, voting can result in worse outcomes for society, largely, again, because those transaction costs might keep people from voting, right? And in a republic, the gerrymandering can silence a minority or give majority power to a minority, depending on how those districts are broken up, right? So again, that's why voter behavior might not be as optimal as we hoped in a democratic system. So let's take a look at politician behavior in a democratic system. So again, politicians desire to be elective. So you can imagine that there's going to be a spectrum here of how much of a government service, like say national defense, people prefer. So you might have some people prefer like low levels of national defense spending. You might have people who prefer very high levels of national defense spending. You might also have some people prefer kind of that low to middle preference for national defense spending, so somewhere between low and medium. You might also have some people that might prefer somewhere between medium and high. And then you might have maybe a minority of individuals there just prefer a middle level of national defense spending, right? So imagine that we have one politician, again, their goal is to get elected, and they really prefer low levels of national defense spending, and those are the people that they are representing. You have another politician who might prefer maybe that low to middle level of national defense spending, and so those are the people that they are representing. Who's going to win this election? Well, the people who prefer really low levels of national defense spending, they're going to vote for the politician there on the left. Now, everybody else, however, is going to vote for the politician on the right, right? Because that politician on the right there, not only does he match these people's preferences, right, but he also is the closest match to the people who prefer the high level of national defense spending, right? In other words, the people who prefer that high level of national defense spending don't really like either one of these candidates, but between the two, they're going to like the person on the right better than the person on the left. So that person on the right is going to get most of the votes and get elected. Now, the person on the left recognizes this, and they're going to adjust what they claim their preferences are. So they'll say, wait a second, I've been misrepresented by the media. I really prefer a level of national defense spending that's much closer to the middle. And in doing this, right, moves themselves into a position to get most of the votes. Right now, everybody there to the right is going to vote for that politician who is now considered to be on the right. And then that politician there on the left is going to get a minimum number of votes, and now they know they're going to lose the election. So now they need to come back and say, I've also been represented by the media, right? This is how much of the national defense spending I really prefer, right? This way, people who are close to the right are going to vote for that politician on the right. People who are closer to the left or prefer low levels of national defense spending are going to vote for that politician on the left. And the one who wins the election is the one who's going to get that median voters' preferences. And the ironic part is that this is again, the smaller amount of people who prefer this level of national defense spending, right? So in other words, the politician that wins the election is the one that's going to represent the voter who's going to be the kind of least common, or the one that is perhaps the minority in terms of what they prefer, right? But that is the politician that's going to win the election. All right, so we call this the median voter theorem. And this is the idea that the majority of voting yields the median voters' preferences, that majority voting yields the median voters' preferences, even if it is the least popular preference. Right now, sometimes it isn't the least popular preference, sometimes it's more popular, but even if it is the least popular preference, this is the one that, again, the politicians are going to gravitate towards in order to win the election. Right, so politicians don't necessarily seek the common good like we hope they will, right? They seek to get elected. After all, even if their intentions are good, they might start thinking, well, I can't do any good until I get elected, so let me go ahead and at least say this is what I represent until I get elected, and then I'll do the good things. But then once you're elected, you have to do what you promise, or else your constituency will vote you out. So now you're stuck representing something that you might not necessarily believe in, right? So again, the strategy is to satisfy the median voter, even if the fewest people in our voting populace are like the median voter. So now, again, our voters might not vote for the things that they necessarily care about, particularly if the cost of voting is too high. And now politicians might not necessarily represent the things that people care about if that's not what's going to get them elected. So let's talk about bureaucrat behavior when it comes to this democracy. And bureaucrats are, again, kind of the government employees that carry out government orders, right? So this is, again, an example from Anthony Davies looking at the DMV in Pennsylvania. He says that if you want to go to the DMV near Pittsburgh, then you have to go to this building here. And there is a parking garage in that building where you can actually park in the basement of that building and then go up to the DMV office. The problem is that that parking garage is reserved for employees only, right? So only employees can go to that DMV or to that courthouse there, right? Everybody else who wants to go there has to park on the street and pay for it and maybe traverse whatever bad weather is happening to get there, right? So again, I want you to imagine a situation where you're going to, say, Walmart or Target. Do they have the closest parking spots reserved for their employees only, and then make you pay for parking or trudge long distances for parking? My guess would be no. And the reason why is because they need to convince you to come to their store. Nobody needs to be convinced to come to DMV or the courthouse. They only go because they have to go. Now, if you wanted to renew your license there in the state of Pennsylvania, right, then you can go to this website and you can do it online. But here's what the kind of things that you're going to see at this website. You have to select driver's license / photo ID, right? And then you have to select renewing your driver's license. And then from there, you're going to have to follow this 4-step process in order to do so, right? So you got to receive an invitation to renew. So you got to obtain form DL143 if you want to renew your driver's license. Again, imagine that you wanted to go to Walmart and buy, say, a rake or a broom. And they're like, all right, but you got to fill out form DL143 before you can buy something from us. You might be more inclined to say no thanks and walk out. But you can't do so here because, again, you have to by law, and there's no competitor that gives you an easier way to do it. So once you get that form, then you must return that completed application with a check or money order made payable to the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation in the amount indicated on the form. Please notice that cash and or debit or credit cards cannot be accepted. Right, again, imagine going to Walmart and the only way that they'll take your money is if you write a check. Right, they won't take your credit or debit card and they won't take cash. Again, if that's the case, you might be less inclined to shop there. Right? I don't know how many people even know how to write checks anymore because they've become such an antiquated form of paying for something, right? And then once you do all that, a camera card will be mailed, and you should receive it within 7 to 10 working days after that form is processed. So in 7 to 10 days after the form is processed, you'll receive a camera card. You must then take that along with appropriate identification to any photo center to receive new digitized driver's license. You may be asked to verify the last 4 digits of your social security number when you do so, right? So again, this is a very long and complicated process that probably could be made a lot easier, but there's no incentive for these bureaucrats to make it easier because they don't have to compete, right? They don't have to operate efficiently in order to make a profit or get your business, right? They're there because you have to use them whether you want to or not, right? If you want to look at a California DMV, right, just all you have to do is Google search California DMV and go to the images, and other than their logo, this is the picture you're going to find most common, and that's a lot of people waiting in line that extends all the way outside the building in order to get whatever they need accomplished that day. Again, it's pretty rare that you're going to go to Walmart and see a line this long extending outside the building, right? They tend to move people through that store more quickly because the more quickly they move people through the store, the more profit they're going to make. Right? Again, the DMV doesn't necessarily make any profits by moving more people through that DMV more quickly, so they don't have an incentive to operate more efficiently. Right? Again, they're going to exist whether or not they're operating efficiently. Right? So I want you to compare this to the private sector. So the last thing I bought on Amazon.com were these striking mitts because I help coach the UC Riverside boxing team, and mine are getting kind of old. Right? So I just went on to Amazon and I just Googled, searched, right, these boxing mitts, and this is what came up for $24.99. I can get this and I can have it delivered in 1 day using my Amazon Prime account, right? In fact, I can just buy now and I'm 1 click away from buying this. Compare that to the process you had to go through to renew your driver's license, where you had to go through several clicks just to choose the option to renew it, and then you had to complete that 4-day process or 4-step process, which involved, again, them sending you a camera card that took 7 to 10 days for them to get to you. Again, I can buy this product here if just about 1 click, and it'll only take 1 day for it to get to me. Right. This is kind of an interesting device here. So this is kind of a magnet that comes from Tide that you can put onto your washing machine and preload with your credit card information as well as your address. And all you have to do when you're running low on laundry detergent is push that 1 button, and then a new box of laundry detergent will end up at your house in about 2 to 3 days. right? So again, one button, 2 to 3 days, and you've got a new box of Tide. Imagine if the DMV or the courthouse were that efficient, right? It's amazing how quickly we could get things done. But again, there's no incentive for the bureaucracy to operate that efficiently. There's certainly an incentive for Tide to get boxes of laundry detergent to your house as quickly as possible and to charge you for them, right? Because that's how they make more money. Right. So again, with the bureaucratic behavior, the conclusion is that they usually aren't as efficient because there's no profit motive. Bureaucrats aren't rewarded for good or fast or efficient service, right? For that, and that combined with the fact that there's no competition, or the fact that customers don't have an alternative to dealing with the bureaucrat, is what results in all these jokes about how government workers are a lot slower than private sector workers. Or again, it's the reason why you can expect longer lines at the DMV than you can expect at just about any private business. Right? So with that in mind, be careful what you wish for, right? You might say, if only the government would do this or that, right? Again, that's a nice idea, as does our rainbows and unicorns that we hope to see, right? But remember, because of rational ignorance, because of gerrymandering, because of this median voter theory or the incentives faced by politicians, because of bureaucratic monopolies, right? What we hope for might not always happen, right? What we wish for isn't always what we get, right? So again, this is a kind of lecture on how the political process really works and why it might be less efficient at delivering the goods and services that we'd hope it would deliver, right? Or why it might be less efficient at creating kind of prosperity that we hoped it would create. All right, so these are discussion sessions that you were assigned for this particular week. Again, if you're able to complete them in class, certainly don't feel the need to redo it, right? But if you weren't able to complete it in class, or if you weren't in class today, then here they are so that you can go ahead and do them as you see fit. Again, they are due by the end of the day on Sunday night, right? So again, I apologize for the technical errors that happened during our discussion session. I'm not sure why they weren't working then. Again, these slides are working now, and they are working before this discussion session even started, right? Just something happened there to where they weren't working at the time where I needed them to work the most, right? But again, in order to make up for that, I've created this video so that you can at least get this information if it's something you're interested in. Right? I certainly don't want you to miss out on a good lecture because of technical failure. Right, so I did the best I could during the actual lecture, but I think this video is much better at explaining these ideas. Right, so with that in mind, that is the end of this lecture. Right, feel free to shoot me an email if you have any questions about it, or come visit me in the Zoom office hours. Again, apologize for the technical issues today. Hopefully this makes up for it, and I'll see you all next week.